Welcome, everybody, to the Association Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Marco Calabrese, and today we're speaking with Charles Veal. Charles is a distinguished consultant with over 17 years experience transforming membership bodies, not-for-profits, and public sector organizations. His extensive work spans across digital transformation, membership strategy, and business strategy modeling. So I'm particularly excited to hear his unique insights on creating sustainable growth in the association sector. Charles, thank you very much for coming on today. It's
a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Okay, so perhaps you can just start me off with a bit of an overview of how you spent sort of the last 17 years, what you've focused on and what you've learned.
So 17 years ago, I started to move into the membership sector, initially at the Confederation of British Industry, which is a very large trade association. And then the early part of my sort of career in membership, I was working for a lot of individual membership organisations, such as the Royal Town Planning Institute or the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, professional bodies, really. And then I also worked for a trade union, the National Association of Head Teachers. And in all of these roles, I'd worked as a sort of head of membership, director of membership and events, really trying to understand what members want from that particular association, how we can engage with members more effectively, and how we can deliver more services and events to meet their needs. Also during this time, I became very interested in technology and CRMs, and oversaw sort of CRM transitions, both within Royal Pharmaceutical Society and National Association of Head Teachers. And I've always been very interested in data and analytics. So my work for professional bodies was not only about members, it was also about the digital technology that underlies how these organizations operate. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I made the move into consultancy. And effectively for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been working supporting membership organizations and not-for-profits, and as you mentioned, public sector as well, on digital transformations where they're trying to put in a new CRM or a new website. But also, since both of these projects go to the heart of what an organization is, the CRM really clarifies to an organization what are their priorities and what are their strategic ambitions. This has gone hand in hand with doing a lot of strategic work for membership organizations and also a lot of data analytic works and reporting sort of analysis for membership organizations. Although they might seem disparate, membership strategy, digital transformation and data, I sort of see them as different aspects of the same whole. Really, they're trying to get an organization to be clear on what it's trying to achieve and then efficient and effective processes to deliver that. So that's what I've been doing over the last 17 years.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that coloured background. And so you mentioned you were head of membership, perhaps in multiple instances. Can you maybe just articulate some of the sort of common challenges that you've found in being head of membership?
I think one of the classic challenges for most membership organizations is, what does engagement mean? You sit there with 20,000 members and only 10,000 of them ever do anything with you, and maybe only 1,000 really engage at any scale where they're coming across to multiple events. So of course, as a membership manager, your first concern is, am I not meeting my members' needs? It's important to understand really what is it that members want. And from some associations, frankly, they don't want anything apart from the recognition, so they just want to be a member. For other organizations, it can be more transactional, that actually there is a very particular thing that they want. And that might be training events. It might be access to knowledge and information. And so those types of organizations, if there is lower engagement, it can potentially be a problem. So I think one of the trickiest things for any membership organization is really understanding what is it your members want, and does low engagement matter or not? And that just depends on each individual organization. I think one of the other big challenges for membership organizations is trying to understand the cost of delivering a particular service. Often there's just a sort of generic pool in the budget for membership services, and it's very difficult to tease out actually one member costs me this amount to service in the round. How do you apportion policy work that you might be doing? Or how do you apportion if your membership organization supports research? What part do you tie back to the member? And since it makes it very difficult to say what is the cost of servicing a member and their services that you provide, it can be often very challenging to say, well, how much should we be charging? It's not like a normal business where you can say, if you're producing a can of Coke, it costs me 30 pence to produce it, I'll sell it for 60 pence. It's very hard often to understand what is the true cost of servicing an individual member. So I think, measuring engagement and understanding costs are often big challenges for organizations.
Fantastic. And in your background, you've worked both inside membership organizations and also externally as an advisor. Do you follow certain protocol in terms of when you first sort of go into an organization and try to understand where their core challenges are and how to potentially map those problems to solutions?
So as a general process, what we always do is we start off with a discovery. So a client will come to us with a brief. It might be reporters creating a strategy. It might be digital transformation. And what I've always find very fascinating is often once you start talking to the organization, you realize there is another underlying question. And how do we find out about that? Well, we typically do interviews with relevant departments and relevant staff, but we also like to speak to members and trustees. And this gives us a very rounded view of actually what's going on in the organization. And often there's a different fundamental underlying question. So for example, one organization I worked with, the initial brief really around the strategy was, how can we deliver growth? Actually, when we started to talk to the organization, there was a fundamental question about whether they should merge or not. And depending on whether they merge with another organization or not, that would really impact their growth targets. So whilst growth was almost a secondary strategic question, the primary one was, should they merge or not? And in their particular case, it was too difficult to decide. There were too many pros and cons. So rather than leaving it on the shelf, they made a conscious decision to park it for 5 years. Now that decision is taken away, they're not going to merge for at least 5 years. They may come back to it, but it's taken away. Then they can concentrate on that original brief, which was growth. So I find that the most important part of that early engagement is talking to staff, talking to members, talking to trustees, guided by the brief. But after a while, you often find that there are other factors that need to be taken into account.
And you mentioned that in this particular example, the mandate was to deliver growth, and one of the ideas was potentially to go ahead with a merger with another organization. How did you weigh up the pros and cons? Maybe just talk me through some of your analysis in that regard.
In this particular one, it was fascinating. So there are two types of pros and cons from membership organizations. There's often a business reason that merging might make sense. So you cut your overheads, access to more members, all that kind of things that you might expect in a normal commercial merger between two organizations. But membership is often, for professional bodies particularly, is often so much more. It's also linked to identity. By joining a professional body for 40 years, I'm saying something about who I am, whether I'm an engineer, an actuary, doctor, whatever it is. It's a lot to do with identity. So when thinking about merging, it's not simply the business case. Will it lead to cheaper subscriptions or more services to my members? There is also a question around identity. Is there a relationship strong enough to really warrant the merging of these two bodies? The first question you might be able to answer with statistics and information. The second question is a political choice. And that can only be answered by the membership body itself. So part of my role is to really tease out what are the issues. And often they go back to, there's the financial business case, and you can mention the pros and cons. But in addition, there will often be something about identity. And then it's helping the board work through that issue, and for the board or whatever is the appropriate governance structure within the organization to make that choice. It's not a choice I as a consultant can make, or indeed particularly give a recommendation.
That's okay. And so aside from sort of having a conversation with members and key leaders within the organizations, do you also sort of conduct surveys as well and process data?
Yes, I mean, it depends very much on the brief, but a lot of the briefs that I work with are actually about a long-term member strategy. And in that particular case, it's always best to start with asking your customers, your members, what they want. So we would typically start with a survey. And then coming out of that survey, we would identify clusters and groups of particular behaviors. So members who want to be more engaged, members who really want to see the organization helping them through their career, members who just want information, help them in their day-to-day job, and they don't want anything else. By understanding these clusters, we then form focus groups so we can tease out the real concerns and issues for different groups of members and where they see the organization going. So with that bedrock and foundation of empirical data and qualitative data, it's much easier to start those strategic conversations. Again, what I find fascinating about membership bodies is if you're a purely commercial organization, you might ask your customers what you want, then you go out and you give your customers what they want. Membership bodies aren't. On the whole, most professional bodies have a charter, and those charters state that they are there for the public good. So even if your members want something, you're under no obligation to deliver it to them if you as a membership body think, actually, our members need something different. They might want this, and might be great, but actually society and our members need this, and we're going to deliver it. So for example, maybe the members want to make the entrance exams easier or harder for a particular qualification. It's, to a certain extent, it's up to the professional body to make the choice about what the standard should be in the interests of society. And so I always find that very interesting. You have to listen to your members, but unlike a commercial organization, you're not obliged to follow their lead.
That makes perfect sense. And, as you mentioned in the start, understanding your members as a starting point is key, but then it's down to the organization and the experience and understanding that the organization has on the industry in terms of sort of guiding the members towards what they actually need. So the two can sort of go hand in hand, right? Understanding members, what their needs are, what the requirements are, and serving them, but only up to where the organization feels that is of most benefit to the members. If I summarize.
Exactly. And it's a very difficult line to know. And it's a very, very challenging thing for any particular leader in any type of association. And you see a spectrum. So professional bodies, their remit is to provide high standard for society. And that means they expect high standards of their members. Trade associations, some are for the industry, some of the particular sectors of the industry. So how much they listen or they should respond to their members' needs varies depending on the particular function of that membership organization. And there is a spectrum.
And over the years, has your view of membership organizations changed in terms of how they operate, in terms of what their needs are, in terms of what their members require of associations?
I think that's a really fascinating question. And when you start going back to, why are there professional bodies? Certainly, let's start off with those. They're often very much about standards in order to protect society. You reach a certain level and therefore you can join a particular professional body, REBA or RICS or whatever it is. So standards are really what's driving one of the key sort of value offerings of what they have there. Then in addition, they're communities. They enable professionals, accountants, actuaries, plumbers, whatever it is, to come together to discuss about their profession, to share ideas and to network. So that community element is also really important. Finally, the third kind of foundation is knowledge. Now, if those are sort of always true, how people come together as a community and how knowledge is shared has undergone profound changes in the last 15 years. And just look at us doing this interview here. 15 years ago, we would have been together in one room. Here it is online. So how do membership organizations react to that challenge where the community aspect is now provided online? And what does that mean? So, for example, one particular teaching trade union, there was a very active Twitter group. It'll probably be an X group now. And so it wasn't necessarily videos or webinars people really wanted. It was space online in social media where they could exchange ideas. And you see that in other industries as well, where there might be very active Facebook forums. And that's how people want community to be made. In other professional circumstances, actually people want a lot more face-to-face. And so organizing events and meetups becomes particularly important. And then the same is also true of information. In the past, you would have got your magazine and you read your journal and you keep up. that way with professional development or attend events. Nowadays, there is a growing demand for online learning platforms so that members can learn when they want and how they want. See this particularly in the medical profession, where doctors and medics are often very time poor. So if they want to learn about a new procedure or a new process, they want to be able to log in whenever they want, receive high quality training that meets their learning styles, delivered online. Whilst the foundation of kind of standards and public good, community and sharing of knowledge remains the same, how you deliver community and how you deliver information and knowledge has changed tremendously in the last 10, 15 years. And with AI, I can only see that it will undergo another quite profound transition.
And so would you say then the expectation from members has sort of increased or changed? You know, you mentioned some key technologies there, let's say member portals, for example. And so it's now some of these technologies are no longer, you know, a nice to have, but access to knowledge and knowledge assets through a sort of a digital platform. That's, you know, key thing that members are looking for. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The reason I pause slightly is that there can be a temptation to resolve the issue by creating your own knowledge portal and assuming that's where members go. Members' expectations are shaped by their experiences in wider society. So virtual members will expect to be able to pay online. And they expect to be able to do that because they do their shopping online. They pay their electricity bill online. So membership organizations are competing not so much with other membership organizations who might offer a similar kind of product or service, but society's expectations. So you have to keep up with that. Where that becomes particularly challenging is with knowledge. If I want to find out about something, why would I not go to ChatGPT? Why would I not just Google things on the internet? Why would I go to my professional body's area? And the main reason people go is the curation of knowledge, that they know and that they trust whatever's in that member portal is accurate and up to date. So you have to be able to do that as a membership organization. That's not always easy. So if you don't have the resources, you don't necessarily have to provide the information service as a membership organization. You might focus on standards and community. But if you do have the resources, what members will expect from you is not necessarily being the source of all knowledge, but to curate the knowledge, to say, actually, if you Google or you go on ChatGPT, you will get plethora. Come to us and we've already curated like a well-produced library what you actually need to know. And so I think it's incumbent on membership organizations to think about how realistically they can do that and therefore what their proposition is to their members. Classic example on community is many membership organizations have built community platforms that nobody ever visits, but they are there on X, on Facebook, on other platforms. So is it better for the membership organization to try and create an online community, or actually to go to where the community is and become engaged there? So you don't always have to provide the platforms. Depends on your circumstances.
And why do you think in some instances community platforms aren't visited by members?
I think it's the nature of how people like to interact. So community, you tend to want to do when it's convenient to you. And you want it to be fast and quick. And Twitter, Facebook, Instagram have spent billions on developing platforms that fulfill that need. They're quick, easy, they look nice, they're fantastic to use. And so it's very difficult for membership organizations to compete at that level. And if I'm a member and I want to chat to another member and I've got to log onto a website and maybe it doesn't work on my phone or it doesn't render as well, and the person on there hasn't logged on that I want to communicate with, there's just too many barriers. Whereas I could just use LinkedIn or I can use X or Twitter. So I think one of the challenges for community platforms is that they're competing with billion-dollar companies who think about nothing else than community. Sometimes they work, and where it does work, it can be very successful. Again, it's another example. Membership organizations aren't necessarily competing with each other. They're competing with other businesses within society. The community, in effect, they're competing with LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. And That's, these are giant companies to compete with.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned sort of Facebook and Instagram as the sort of de facto standard in terms of community platforms. And earlier you mentioned artificial intelligence is obviously the big technology that's come in. How do you see associations leveraging artificial intelligence and, potentially particularly around knowledge sharing? So obviously OpenAI's invested billions and hundreds of billions, in fact, in this technology. How would you see associations using that technology in order to better serve their members?
It's amazing how quickly things change. If you'd asked me that question a year ago, I would have said they are extremely cautious because the AI is simply inaccurate. And the role of professional bodies to provide the best, accurate, and in often cases legally compliant information. The AIs are just too risky, too dangerous. This year, they're getting a lot better, and that's just the open platform. So some membership organizations are experimenting with taking their professional knowledge and working with specially designed AIs that's looking at their professional knowledge to answer questions, not the general internet, just their professional knowledge, so that they are very confident of the responses being given out. It suddenly means that it's much easier to service a member's question doing this for a particular client in, the actuarial world, or I have an accountancy question. And the AIs will be able to start giving out accurate information about do legal requirements or best practice. Still a number of years off, because I think I'm not sure of any professional body who's actually released an AI knowledge base that's giving out legally compliant information. But the pace of change in the last year has been really impressive. So fast forwarding 3 to 5 years, I would start to expect to see pioneering membership organizations having an AI layer that's taking their knowledge and answering members' questions accurately. And then the response is whenever you want. You don't have to phone up a hotline and wait till somebody gets in touch with you. You don't have to drop an email. You don't have to read an article that doesn't quite answer your question. You can get the response and you can interrogate it and query it. You can ask for sources. You can ask for references. And that I would see in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. Now, going back to your point, legally compliant information, that's very dangerous to offer. But when it comes to less mission critical information, certainly I think the magic is where you combine association knowledge with artificial intelligence. And just as you said, creating a user experience where they can have a conversation with with various resources that then allows for a more sort of tailored and personalized experience, because you can say, well, I'm particularly interested in events in this part of London, let's say, specifically focused on, science, for example. And then the AI assistant can map your needs to a particular resource. Many associations have a considerable amount of data and resources, of course, that they've curated, as you said, and accumulated over the years. The question isn't necessarily how much data do they have. The question is, how accessible is it to members? And I feel that artificial intelligence solves that problem, or certainly can solve that problem.
And I think you're right. And I would expect those sort of AIs that are doing less complex interrogation, for example, can you tell me about events on this particular topic? I've got a query about this question. Being able to render it in human language rather than having to click on a number of filters and guess what the filters might mean. It would be a very useful service, and those should be deployable to a certain extent. Now it just requires organizations to grasp the nettle and start implementing them. And then that next level up of how do you get the AI to interrogate maybe documents or reports you've written? Again, making a very good point, non-legally compliant ones, and being able to pull them back and say, oh, you might be interested in this, without having to give a definitive answer. Again, the technology exists at the moment. So it'll be really interesting to see which organizations embrace that.
Absolutely. And so we touched upon data. How do you use data in your analysis for membership organizations?
So we tend to do sort of data looking at membership trends, recruitment, renewals, use of service, and so on. And those can identify problems and issues. But it also gives a bedrock of understanding the dynamics of actually what's going on with a particular organization. So a very interesting example was a large membership organization. They have about 120,000 members, but their renewal rate was in the late kind of 80s, which, it's not bad, but you could have expected it to be a bit higher. When you actually looked at the data, there was a cohort of about 20,000 or so who had a very low renewal rate. They were turning over once every 2 years. And there was another cohort had much higher sort of renewal rate up into the mid-90s. And really what was happening is that they were, with the same membership product, meeting different sector needs. There were some people who needed membership for 2 years to establish themselves in a particular career path and then wanted to leave that professional body because they were going off in a different direction. Whereas there were others who wanted to become more deeply involved in that particular professional sphere. So they stayed as members. So there wasn't really a problem with their membership. It was just understanding that there were two dynamics going on within that single membership tier, and then making sure that their services and that their recruitment of new members recognize that there were different sort of groups with very, very different characteristics. And that's what sort of data analytics can really give you insight into, is what's happening underneath the hood, as it were. Well, where are their sort of challenges and changes? It can also identify problems that you can't quite see. So one membership organization we worked with had a brilliant renewal rate of about 95%. So they actually thought, our customers are pretty happy. We've got quite good net promoter scores. And they were focusing very much on recruitment. For various reasons, it took a long time to become a member because you had to go through a series of exams. So actually the membership pipeline took a very long time to increase any new members. What they hadn't appreciated was that they just needed a drop of about 3% in their renewal rate and the organization would start to shrink. So whilst their current members were happy, tiny change in those members' behavior would cause them a big issue and they couldn't quickly recruit new people because of this 8-year pipeline. And it was the analytics that really brought that out, that whilst everything seems fine on the surface, if you take your eye off the ball on your current members, and they have a small change in behavior, this can be a very serious problem. And so they readdressed the emphasis between sort of engaging and supporting current members and recruiting new members to ensure that they kept those new members engaged. And that all came from data analytics. The last area that can also be very interesting with the data analytics are projections to help organizations understand their appetite for change and risk. So we worked with one particular trade association in effect. And they wanted to raise their prices by about 40%. They were working in the charitable sector and they needed this additional revenue to discharge their charitable objectives. So the actual members were very unlikely to receive a direct benefit. And they'd been worrying for ages, should we do this or not? We did some survey work, kind of hinted that people may or may not be okay with it. But then we did modeling and we modeled out a worst case scenario. Where essentially their membership dropped by 15%. In that scenario, they were still revenue neutral if they increased their prices. And the board took the decision that they felt that there's no way the membership would drop by 15%. So therefore they understood the risk and they were willing to take it. In the end, the membership didn't change at all. And so they managed to raise their revenue by 40% with no impact on membership. And that revenue they could take to discharge their charitable duties. So the point of the analytics there wasn't to say what was going to happen, but to help the organization have a conversation about risk so they can make a choice that they'd been avoiding making for years. They kind of knew they had to collect their prices, but they didn't really understand the impact or what the risk was. And that's where the modeling, taking historical data, projecting into the future, really helped them understand their risk and make a choice.
Very interesting that you mentioned modeling. I mean, I was on your website and saw a tool that you have there. Could you maybe dive a bit deeper into sort of what the modeling is useful for, how it works, and what other sort of nuggets you've uncovered in using this tool?
So on our website, there's a relatively straightforward modeler which enables you to say, how many members do I think I'd like it next year, and what's the renewal rate? And then you can see the growth and some income projections. We do far more sophisticated modelers for clients with lots of variables because there are lots of dependencies. Maybe a particular organization is going to launch a recruitment campaign and feels that they should be able to increase their membership. Or maybe a fellow membership body has started to shrink and there's an opportunity to, obtain their members, or maybe there's an overseas growth strategy. So lots of variables. And this enables an organization to sort of say, well, what happened if this increased by 10%? Or what happened if we put this price up here? Where's our break-even point and where's our risk? The point of these models isn't really to determine what's going to happen. It's to facilitate a conversation. In the end, they're just models. You can put in whatever numbers you like and come out with whatever projection you want. But they help clarify, where is there risk in what I'm doing? What's actually of value to me? Do I really want to grow, or do I want to consolidate the depth of my relationship with a customer or members? And the models really help that discussion. So we're working with one particular client and we're creating 3 membership models. They're essentially 3 different versions of the future. One is very focused on a core central membership. One is focused on a much broader membership. And what would they look like? And I don't know which membership model the organization is going to go with. I don't really think they do either. But they need to have a conversation about their principles. And this is where the models really help. And going back to the previous example of the trade association who wanted to put up prices, our model wasn't anywhere near accurate. Nothing happened at the end. But that wasn't the point of the model. The point of the model was to understand risk and allow the organization to make a choice. And that's how we use models, really, to help the organization understand what are their principles, what are their risk appetite, and what do they want to do, and what choices do they want to make.
So the models essentially help to clarify risk and start a conversation. And that really helps with building out different potential scenarios. And so would you say that also can feed into prioritization of initiatives?
Precisely. Particularly if you want to change your membership model. A really interesting one at the moment is whether an organization is reflecting on, should it be more policy focused or should it be more community focused? And there's no right or wrong, go either way. But if you're more policy focused, you want to recruit a lot more policy people. If you're community focused, that's different technology. So that's different priorities. By creating different models, it helps the organization say, well, actually, yes, this is the direction we want to go in. Therefore, we're going to prioritize this technology or this marketing campaign or this type of recruitment. For membership organizations aren't quite clear on the choice that they've made. They're trying to do everything. And clarifying what's the real priority, and the models help do that, help you say, well, actually, for this year, this is the priority, and we're going to focus more resource, more time here.
That's interesting you mentioned that. Well, we found that a lot of associations are struggling with prioritizing the right initiatives. And maybe you could talk to what the pitfalls are of not doing the analysis up front and relying on intuition rather than data, hard facts, and models, as you said.
See, without making a clear choice, and it's often more about clear choices than intuition, then you just find everybody's going in a different direction. So you'll have 4 or 5 directors who've all got a slightly different understanding of what the objectives really are. That translates down to their staff, and the organization's pulling in different directions. So your CRM or your website or your Sense AI won't be optimized because you're trying to get it to do lots of different things. Everyone's got lots of different opinions. So the clarity of priority helps the organization focus. I think one of the challenges for membership organizations, they're not like, a car tire manufacturer. Car tire manufacturer is producing car tires. It's pretty uniform. Membership organizations are running events. They're doing policy. They're running learning management systems. They might be doing research. They might be running networking events, all very different types of activity. And so it's easy for the organization to pull in different directions. And that prioritization helps keep it focused. And then you can get sort of better outcomes. rather than running a project that doesn't quite work because everyone's got different understandings of priorities. And that's very common in membership organizations.
And it's also very demotivating and demoralizing in pursuing a project which then ends up having minimal impact or arguably even the wrong impact on your organization. And then the flip side to that is missed opportunities, in terms of maybe expanding membership in a particular segment or cohort, which is ripe for expansion. So we find that as well, that prioritizing the wrong initiatives is sort of a double-edged sword, where you're either working towards an initiative that has minimal impact and therefore doesn't move your organization in the direction that you want, but then also prevents you from looking and working towards opportunities which would surface quite clearly after having done the analysis.
I think you're completely right. And membership organizations do sort of sometimes miss out on those opportunities because pulling in different directions, and they haven't done fundamental analysis where it's at the greatest return, and they haven't also necessarily got that full agreement priorities across the organization.
So what would you say then would be sort of the top indicator of success when executing new initiatives?
I think clarity is one of the most important elements. Having a really clear aim and understanding why you are doing an initiative and buy-in from the relevant kind of teams. And that might sound easy to do, but it's doing it with a real level of honesty and time. So you might have a statement and everybody might agree to it, but actually spending the time to go through to tease out the issues or underlying factors. Really interesting example of that goes back to another organization I've been working with recently, who again were very interested in growth, but actually one of the more core priorities was to a certain extent stability in the organization because it had gone through a number of elements of change. So whilst there was one initiative that everybody had sort of agreed to, there was another one in the background that wasn't necessarily clearly articulated. And actually, when they started articulating that far more clearly, it became much easier for the organization to work here together. And that stability formed the foundation for growth. And that only comes through those very open and honest conversations and a deep reflection of what is the genuine priority here, spending time thinking about it. And this is often one of the challenges for a membership organization. There's so much going on. Business planning, well, let's do this. Discussion at the kind of SLT, sign off, but not really making the space to think things through properly and have really reflective discussions based on data and insight to make sure you really understand what the priority is and what it means.
So a great way to improve the probability of success is by ensuring clarity through data. That be?
Yes, I think so. And also iteration. So iteration is so important, and even in statistics, there are certain statistical models where iterating data is really important to the final outcome. So I would say the same with any strategic initiative, clarity about what you're doing, but also checking in, because halfway through it, 6 months down the line, it might be reasonable to change the direction or to rethink and refocus what the goals and objectives are. But you need to have that check-in, that clarity at the beginning and that check-in. And that's one of the great things actually about AI, that in the past, you'd often get data and information, you make choices, you go ahead. The ability to rapidly iterate, to question and reevaluate that kind of agile framework is made much easier when you have access to data and you can think about it in different kind of ways very quickly.
That's a great point. And the speed of iteration with artificial intelligence is now possible. And what sort of advice would you give a leader in terms of adopting or at least beginning to use some of this new technology, and particularly AI, somebody that hasn't used it before and is on the fence about whether or not to begin introducing AI into their organization?
I think my first really important message is you're using it, even if you don't realize you are. So your staff will currently be using it to write emails, to do all sorts of things. So the first wave tends to be help me improve the way I'm writing things, generative AI. One of the reasons this can be quite an important policy is that you may have staff at the moment who are writing confidential emails. They give them to the AI to improve the language and whatever, and that's great. But they may be using open AI sources. So that confidential email now becomes part of the general model. So even if you don't think you're using AI, I must guarantee you some of your staff members are, and then to a small chance they might be using it in a well-meaning fashion, but inappropriately. So you need an AI policy, even if it's only on generative AI. But that's the first round, which is basically what happened a couple of years ago when people started using AI to improve their language or how they're writing things. I think the next wave is really about analytics and curation of information and knowledge and using AI tools to understand the dynamics in membership. And that can be incredibly powerful. Quick answers. One of the examples I like to give is not actually from membership, but it's a brilliant example. It's actually from John Lewis. So John Lewis introduced a sort of data analytics system called Tableau. They gave really great deep insights, but they found for most of their staff, it was just too complex. They didn't really know how to read bar charts or line charts, and it was just a bit confusing. Tableau introduced an AI layer. And then the staff could ask a question in their language. What do you think I should be putting on the shelves this week? Or is this predicted, or should I reorder this particular product line? And it would give them very precise answers. And I think that's where the AIs have a real opportunity to help membership organizations. And by looking at your data and then giving your staff members the opportunity to ask questions that they maybe don't get from their reporting dashboard. That there's a nuance that they want in there that they find hard to articulate. So at the moment, you might find staff asking a question, you get a new report. Doesn't quite answer what they mean. Now they've seen it, so they go away and ask for another report and another report. Whereas the AIs can be iterative very quickly and help a staff member using human language answer a very specific data question in a way that you just can't do with reporting at the moment. And so I think that's a really exciting opportunity to empower everyone in an organization to ask about data to inform their day-to-day work. And AIs will be brilliant for doing that.
It's democratizing data analysis.
It is.
Where a data analyst no longer needs to be the bottleneck in the organization that is overworked and burdened with a million questions from multiple pockets within the organization. It just levels the playing field within the organization where you can just have a conversation with your data.
Exactly. And I think also, just going back to the beginning of your question, a really important point is it all depends on the quality of your data and your data structures. So if you are new to all of this and thinking about AI, firstly, get your AI policy in because you're using it. You need to know what's going on. But then secondly, you need to start thinking very carefully about the quality and structure of your data, because some of the AIs will struggle if data is just all over the place and it cannot be linked. And so that data governance and that data structure is really important. It's probably less of a challenge for the larger organizations, more of a challenge for the smaller ones.
So you would say that could potentially be a pitfall for some organizations if they don't look to sort of improve the quality of the data and maybe fill out any gaps as well before analyzing it.
Yes. And often it's not as scary as it sounds. It's just that nobody's really had to think about it before. So it kind of doesn't matter if data's a bit fuzzy. But if you really want to embrace AI and the democratization of analytics, get your data nice and clean and tidy and know where it is, know what's talking to what, know what takes priority over something else. And that will really help the AIs.
Yeah, data has very much been one of the most important components of businesses because, as you mentioned, it really helps with understanding where you currently are, what the projections look like. It really supports modeling, decision making. But I would say that data is now more important than ever because of how easy it is now to draw insights and build strategies from that data. And now anybody that's listening that was thinking about maybe putting off improving the quality of the data, certainly it's an important precursor to running analysis via AI on that data.
I think you're right. And I think we see that in our own business. The number of people coming to us for data analytics has just surged, and particularly the types of organizations, again, smaller organizations that possibly didn't feel that they really needed to in the past. And a lot of this comes back to your members' experience in the outside world. Everything is becoming more personalized, be it on Amazon, be it on streaming services, whatever you choose and do. And there is the same expectation of members from their membership organization that they can find information quickly, that things are responsive, that you understand what I want as a member from my behavior, from my online behavior with you. And you need data to do that. And that's more and more the standard. And as the generations change, I'm slightly older, and I think people in my generation are possibly more relaxed about our membership bodies not being as personalized. The younger generation is very different, and they will expect, as standard personalization, they will expect to give you information and you to react. So that the world demography changes, the new generation will expect you to use data. Membership organizations need to get on board with that.
It's interesting because it goes back to your point about how everything became digital over the last sort of 10 years, and there was an expectation of being able to access knowledge, that curated knowledge from associations via online platforms. Now it feels there's a growing expectation for associations to be able to analyze and understand their members' needs at sort of breakneck speed.
Yes, and it's not an unreasonable one because you can. So 5 years ago, to be honest, not too dissimilar in conversations. It'd be lovely to understand our data. But the barriers to understanding it were so great and expensive, most organizations would muddle through. Not half as expensive or as difficult nowadays. So there's no reason not to get on and use that data to help improve what you're doing.
And what sort of final advice or pointers as a sort of an overview would you give to leaders listening today?
I think for membership organizations, and this is a sort of ancient advice, but know thyself. It's been really clear who you are or what you're trying to achieve. That then starts to inform your data structures and your data governance, which can really help you analyze data, use the sort of iterative learning through AIs, so that you can provide your members with what they want and what they need, and enrich that whole member experience and that whole member value proposition. And whilst that might sound like something you want to do anyway, I suspect the new generations will come to expect it more and more. But the key is to start with being really clear in your mind, what are your goals and objectives, and then making sure you have a data structure and a data strategy that enables you to deliver on that, and then embracing all these fantastic and exciting new opportunities offered by AI to curate data, to analyze your members, to enable your members to interact and ask questions in new kind of ways. It's the whole chatbot scenario. And it's a really exciting time for members to provide their traditional services of quality and standards, community and information in novel and innovative ways.
Final question, Charles. What drives you to keep helping membership organizations?
I love getting under the skin of what organizations are trying to achieve. Very often we will get a brief and it will be about something, we want to grow members, we want to increase engagement, whatever it happens to be. It's when you start to get underneath and you understand the issues that are within the organization and how actually addressing those issues then helps you deliver growth. It is always really fascinating. There are often several factors, and I really like getting to the heart of what drives an organization. And once there's clarity there, everything else seems to drop out. What the strategic direction should be, what the data strategy should be, what the data structure, what the investment strategy. And it goes back to clarity. And I really enjoy working with organizations to achieve that clarity over their strategy, over their data structures, over how they want to grow and engage members.
Charles, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. And for our listeners looking to learn a bit more about improving their organization, or if you just want to connect with Charles, you can visit his website at charlesveal.com. Charles, are there any other ways that our listeners could get in touch?
Sure. We also have a membership-focused website, which is www.membershipinsights.co.uk, and reach out to me on LinkedIn, on my website, and we're always here to help you with your membership strategies, your membership digital transformation, and this whole exciting new world data and AI.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you so much to Sonos AI for hosting this. I found it a really interesting chat, and I'm really impressed with the work you guys are doing.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Charles.